Recording in progress. Okay, take two. My name is Angela Schmidt. I'm the film archivist with the Alaska Film Archives at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I'm going to be talking for the Alaska Film Archives. I'm going to be talking for about 10 minutes and showing you some short film clips from the Alaska Film Archives. And then David Reamer is going to talk a little bit about the film that we're watching tonight. David Reamer is an academic and public historian who writes daily on social media, weekly for the Anchorage Daily News, and intermittently elsewhere. He's co-author of Black Lives in Alaska from 2022, and he was named 2023 Co-Alaska Historian of the Year. So I look forward to hearing him tonight. But I'm going to start by saying, like, what a treat this is. I'm so excited to show this 105-year-old film in its entirety to you this evening. Yeah. Portions of the film were originally shot in Alaska, and portions were originally shot in this very region. So it's really special that we're able to bring it back here tonight to show to this full audience. I really wish that I could go back in time, actually, and tell the movie director, his name was Al Ira Smith, and his two leads, Lottie Cruz and Henry Bolton, that we are here tonight watching their film. I mean, I think it would knock their socks off. It really would. This movie did not gain much traction when it was released back in 1919. It was kind of a low-key, low-budget production that mainly relied on locals for all the extras in the crowd scenes. And yet, I think it's a movie that really translates well to our modern sensibilities, and I think you'll really enjoy it. But I think David Reamer is going to talk a little bit more about the film's production and history, so I don't want to steal his thunder. My main objective tonight is to tell you a little bit about the technical aspects of the film and to the Alaska Film Archives. So The Girl Alaska is 45 minutes long. It's a black and white silent film. We don't have a musical score for it, and to my knowledge, no score was ever specifically written for it. Although I'm sure that when it was originally shown in movie theaters, almost certainly there was someone, banging away on a piano in the background while the movie played. But not all silent films had their own specific scores. For tonight's showing, my colleague in Fairbanks, his name is Derwin Teague, located some royalty-free music, in other words, music we didn't have to pay for, and that's going to accompany the film that we're watching in person here tonight. So you'll get more of a feel for what that original experience might have been like, for audiences who watched it in a theater with, someone playing piano. I do have to say, though, that some of the music that Derwin chose is a little bit anachronistic, so please be a little forgiving of that, but it really adds to the enjoyment of the film. So the Library of Congress holds the only known original release print of the film that we're showing tonight, but the Alaska Film Archives holds a copy of the Library of Congress film. And I was really pleased that when David contacted me, asking me, about The Girl Alaska and wanting to see the film, I shared our copy with him first. But then I thought, I bet if we could get the Library of Congress to make a high-resolution scan of their original print, it would be even more amazing. So I reached out to the Library of Congress, and to my astonishment, they had recently digitized it. And they were so excited, to share that print or that file with our institution. So that's what we're going to see tonight. We're doing more Zoom stuff here, I guess. Oh, no. Okay, so now what movie showing would be complete without a few little shorts to watch before the main feature? So I'd like to show you a few short film clips of early films from our collection that were made in the Cordova region. And Kayla, can I have your help in getting that going? While she's getting that going, I wanted to say, oh no, okay, we got it going. So just almost, we're getting there.
Okay, ready?
All right, take it away. Thank you. Okay, so these first film clips are from the William O. Field collection. William Field made these films in about 1925 or 1926 during one of his early trips to Alaska, when he himself was in his early 20s. Field was from a very wealthy East Coast family, but he enjoyed science and outdoor adventures, and he went on to earn degrees in geology from Harvard and became well known for his studies of glaciers. In this clip, a train arrives in Cordova where men offload sacks of copper ore onto the dock. During the early 1900s, Cordova served as a transportation hub for ore coming out of the Kennecott mines, about 200 rail miles away. Over the years, millions of tons of ore were hauled via the Copper River Northwestern Railway to the docks in Cordova, where it was then loaded onto steamships, and smelting took place in cities such as Tacoma and Washington State. This clip is from the early 1930s. This is also from William Field's collection. And this shows scenes of travel along the Copper River and Northwestern Railway. Here's a train crossing over the Miles Glacier Bridge, also known as the $1 Million Bridge, as you know. The bridge was built in the early 1900s to span the Copper River, 50 miles from Cordova. At 1,550 feet long, it was the longest steel bridge on the Copper River and Northwestern Railway line. The bridge was converted to a road bridge in the 50s, but collapsed during the 1964 earthquake, and it was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2000. These are scenes of men maneuvering an automobile or speeder car outfitted for travel on the railroad track. And if you want to see any of these scenes after tonight's showing, these are on the Alaska Film Archives YouTube channel. I put some information sheets in the back of the room. On your way out, you can like take a picture of those sheets or grab one, and it has a link to our YouTube channel on it. The next clip that we're going to see is from the late 1920s, and it was made by a group of executives from the Hills Brother Coffee Company as they traveled around Alaska on a bit of a junket. Hills Brother Coffee was popularly known as Red Can. Anyway, these executives spent about 5 months traveling to every conceivable location in Alaska, and they shot about 15 seconds of film in every community they stopped in. So here's Cordova. And it looks very similar today, I think. In case that went by too fast, let's watch it again. And this little scene that they filmed, I think illustrates both the popular allure and also the danger of Alaska filmmaking in the early days. So again, this is from about 1927 that this little film clip was shot. And the final clip that I'm going to show is from a film called Alaska Wonders in Motion #2 by Al Ira Smith. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because I just mentioned it a few minutes ago. Al Smith is the director of tonight's movie, The Girl Alaska. And here we see some scenes that he shot of early Anchorage. These are scenes that Smith filmed during one of his early trips to Alaska in about 1915 or 1916. From these clips, I hope you'll get a feel for Smith's eye for action and his skill as a cameraman. One can imagine how caught up he was in the excitement of Alaska during this very dynamic period in the early 20th century. And I think we're all very lucky that his films survived to this day. I think it was in the process of shooting some of these early films, these film clips that we're seeing right now, that made him think, wouldn't it be great, to make a longer production, or kind of a narrative film about Alaska. And here are some scenes that I think you'll see repeated in tonight's film. While these scenes are playing out, I'll say a little bit more about the Alaska Film Archives. We're part of the Alaska and Polar Regions Collections and Archives located in the Elmer E. Rasmussen Library at University of Alaska Fairbanks. We hold about 8,000 films in our collection and probably 2 to 3 times that many videos as well. Our collections cover Alaska's history from the earliest days of filmmaking through about the early 2000s. Nearly all of our holdings were obtained through donation from filmmakers, institutions, and individuals. Items cover every Alaska-related topic conceivable and range from professionally made productions to amateur home movies. One of our main goals is to make these items available for people to see and use. And with that, I will turn it over to David Reamer for further discussion about tonight's film. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for showing up. My name is David. Thank you, Angie. As we jump into this, as she said, this is the only known surviving print, but there is a hint in the history that maybe, just maybe, there is another one that existed before. So this movie came out in 1919. And on September 19th, 1919, Jefferson Smith III saw The Girl of Alaska at a theater in St. Louis. He left the theater furious, and then the very next day, he mailed a letter out to the distribution company. And as Smith III put it, quote, "A portion of this film is devoted to libeling my father," which would be Jefferson Smith II, Soapy Smith. Smith III demanded, quote, "Cut from all prints of this picture the libelous reference you have made." And from the surviving correspondence, the distribution company initially agreed to remove the supposedly offensive scenes, but were slow to actually follow through. When you watch this copy, the one copy that we have now, what you're seeing passing before you are the only references to Soapy in the movie. It says he was a notorious gunman, shows his graffitied Skagway grave, and says, "This fellow tried to shoot up Skagway. They buried him with his boots on." This is, of course, rather far from the worst things that have been said about Soapy, or that could be said about Soapy. So it raises the question, would a studio have offered to remove these scenes? Would this section have been enough to provoke Soapy's son to start a letter writing campaign to hire a lawyer? Maybe, maybe not. Did the distribution company finally make the changes? And what we are seeing is the rather cleaner version, perhaps edited from the original release. Possible? Probably not likely. But that opportunity out there exists, that maybe somewhere there is a dirty version of this movie, hopefully buried somewhere out in the tundra somewhere to be discovered.
Hi, everyone.
So The Girl Alaska is the first known narrative movie primarily shot in Alaska, pending one of you digging up something even more obscure. The young woman named Molly heads for Alaska to find fortune in a missing father. Cross-dresses as a boy on her way north and is nicknamed Alaska, hence the title. Filming was in the summer and early fall of 1970. The opening was shot in Pasadena. Some scenes on the steamship that you'll see were perhaps shot docked at Seattle. The rest is Alaska, including shooting on the SS Alaska, as you'll be able to identify, in Skagway, at the Miles and Childs Glaciers, in Seward, at Anchorage. There will be a title card that says Fairbanks. And while the director made a public note of wanting to visit there, planning to visit there during shooting, there's no evidence that he ever did, and the footage in the film at that time appears to be a mix of Anchorage and Seward filling in. The Anchorage shooting took place in September 1917, featuring the Panhandle Pool Room on 4th Avenue near C Street, lightly redressed to resemble a Klondike Gold Rush era saloon. When it comes to that point in the movie, and this is one of my favorite things about it, note the many authentic looking liquor bottles. Even though Anchorage was established as a dry town and the first legal drink wasn't sold there until all the way into 1933. Of course, pool halls, cigar shops, places like that were often fronts for more illegal offerings in Alaska at this time, gambling, bootlegging, drugs. So they had access to the remnants of their more illegal wares. As Angie hinted at, this movie was poorly reviewed, made no apparent dent in the public consciousness, and faded away instantly, as did the director and the principal actors, of which there are two. The marketing of the film was based primarily on its novelty. As the poster said, the first and only photoplay ever made on Alaskan soil. We're so far back, not only were we not set on how long a movie could be, we weren't even set on what to call a movie. So photoplay it could be. The distributor stretched the truth, as with this ad, claiming every foot was made in Alaska. There's more honest ads when you see in the Anchorage papers when it finally showed up there 2 years after filming, saying, "Come see it, maybe you're in it." The Girl Alaska here falls neatly within the early trends of movies set in Alaska. For decades, in the early filmmaking, a movie set in Alaska had to be specifically about Alaska and Alaskans. An Alaska setting was a feature, not a happenstance. From The Girl Alaska to Chichakos to Chaplin's Gold Rush to Ray Mallo's Eskimo to any version of the spoilers, the Bob Hope's Road to Utopia to North to Alaska to Ice Palace, the setting and landscape, Alaskans and their stories were a product being sold. In this way, the setting was the appeal of Alaska for filmmakers. They were trying to take this cachet, what they thought was valuable in Alaska, and therefore bring people into the theaters outside of Alaska. This cachet is a commodity, it's a resource. And like many other resources, the culture and landscape of Alaska in these films was shipped out for others, typically non-Alaskans, to enjoy and profit from. Alaska was unsurprisingly exploited and plundered. This resource extraction concept gains credence when you look at some of the plots of the early movies set in Alaska, including this very movie and many others, including, again, Charlie Chaplin's 1925 Gold Rush, any of the two versions of The Silver Horde, Bob Hope's 1945 Road to Utopia and Beyond. A surprising number of early Alaska movies end with the protagonist leaving. That is, the point of the movies that come to Alaska, get what they're looking for, whether it be love, riches, or both, or survival, and escape. To overcome the environment, to defeat the wildlife in whatever way. They conquer and take, but then leave, usually triumphantly. It's not really until the 1970s and 1980s that Alaska movies begin to regularly feature stories that just happen to be set in Alaska, that could have been set elsewhere. Films like Claws or Timber Tramps, Runaway Train, Insomnia, The Proposal could have been set elsewhere. They were set in Alaska. But nothing dramatically would have been changed if you changed the name of the state they were in. Like the other early Alaska films made by non-Alaskans, The Girl Alaska reflects its outside perceptions, but also outside valuations of Alaska. That is, they reflected what people thought was of value in Alaska as far as stories. The filmmakers, of course, weren't worried about Alaska audiences. They weren't going to make or break their fortunes on whether the Alaska audience showed up and loved or hated it. So they sold the pieces of Alaska that they thought non-Alaskan audiences would pay to see. And throughout the 19-teens, the 1920s, and 1930s, movies set in Alaska are dominated by gold rush stories. In other words, the past rather than the actual Alaska of the 19-teens, the 1920s, and the 1930s. Like so many things, the nostalgia cycle is not new. We're not in the first, second, or third waves of nostalgia. Back in the 19-teens, the fondness for the gold rush era had already set in, only to rapidly intensify in the 1920s. Those kids who spent their little bit of allowance to buy these torrid, lurid little dime novels of the gold rushes, as grown-ups, wanted to spend their grown-up wages on movies on the same topics. Unsurprisingly. And tellingly, the highest grossing silent comedy was Charlie Chaplin's The Gold Rush. Gold Rush nostalgia finally began to wane in the 1940s as Alaska itself evolves and suddenly changes in the mid-century. World War II, Cold War, the military buildup in Alaska influenced a new mini trend of Alaska movies, including the 1943 John Huston documentary Report from the Aleutians, the 1944 serial Great Alaskan Mystery, and the 1952 Red Snow, the Nupiaq actor Ray Mallo's last work. 1950 Flying Saucer also fits in there if you want to see it that way. The first real full-length UFO movie, also set in Alaska. The female lead of The Girl Alaska cross-dresses for most of the feature. Cross-dressing female leads were an extremely common trope in early American cinema. In her 2016 book, Girls Will Be Boys, Cross-Dressed Women, Lesbians in American Cinema, historian Laura Horak identified over 400 such features. So by common trope, I'm talking this is maybe not girls meet boy, but a hero's journey level of trope. You would go to the movies and not be surprised to see a cross-dressing female lead or supporting character. The examples I include here are some of the most famous actresses of the period, but you also have Katharine Hepburn, Greta Garbo, cross-dressing in several movies. And with some of these actresses, especially Garbo and Dietrich, this androgyny, this flitting between gender roles crossed over into their personal lives, into their personal styles. The movies of this period are rich in this central androgyny that love and desire come in every sort of package, and not just the ones expected by your mom and pop. For a few decades, gender variance for a character was a part of the cinema experience. To be clear, this cross-dressing in the early American movies didn't always mean one thing. Sometimes it was shock value. Sometimes, the male directors wanted to play up the grand reveal later. Shock male lead, look, it's actually a woman all along. That sort of thing. Tensions and reveals. Women wearing trousers was indeed shocking at the time. In 1933, the Paris police chief threatened to arrest Marlene Dietrich if she wore pants there, as she was actually planning to do. But in many other cases, this cross-dressing was lesbian coded. In others, it is more explicitly trans-coded. You've seen people transition, not just being themselves, but actually becoming something else. Regardless of how you read the specific examples, there is this overarching sense that personal identity need not conform to societal expectations. Very, very explicitly, visually. Now this fades, cross-dressing, like the similar drag, became more transgressive in American society as it became more associated openly with lesbians and gays. But that record is there in the films of the early 20th century. And when I say explicit, I mean as explicit as you can be in early 20th century movies. Even a slight project like The Girl Alaska is far from subtle on this point. Molly, our female lead, pushes against role expectations. Cross-dressing is how she rejects the limits placed on her as a woman by society. She reads a newspaper article about, quote, great opportunities for young men. An untitled card then declares, for the first time in her life, Molly is sorry she's not a boy. Another title card notes, the independence of pants, probably because they have pockets. This is the literal text of the movie. And by the way, again, she cross-dresses for the far majority of the film. It's not really giving anything away to say this is at its end a boy meets girl movie. And the guy who falls in love and marries her is introduced to her and knows her primarily as a boy. His affection, his desire for her, undoubtedly sparked and grew during this period. And at the moment that she is revealed as a woman, that is when he proposes. At minute 39 in a 45-minute movie. It is as if all these odd feelings he had been feeling inside, all these taboo thoughts he had been thinking suddenly became acceptable, and he instantly acted upon them. Again, not very subtle. With that said, let's get into the movie.
For those joining on Zoom, I don't need the mic for this. I would recommend going to watch the movie on your own. The link is in the email with the instructions, and then coming back in about 45 minutes at around 8:15 or a little bit after for the follow-up discussion with questions. So please watch the movie on your own and then come back.